President Biden is demanding an end to the spike in hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. During last night's address, he said attacking others based on race or ethnicity is purely un-American.
Vicious hate crimes against Asian Americans who've been attacked, harassed, blamed, and scapegoated. At this very moment, so many of them are fellow Americans. They're on the front lines of this pandemic trying to save lives. And still, they're forced to live in fear for their lives just walking down streets in America. It's wrong, it's un-American, and it must stop.
Democratic lawmakers are also taking action. Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono and New York Representative Grace Meng have introduced legislation to address the attacks. One of the most notable provisions is to create a Justice Department position to oversee hate crimes related to COVID-19. Anti-Asian hate crimes surged by 150% across 16 cities in 2020. That's according to a report by the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University, San Bernardino. Hate crimes overall dropped by 7% last year. Marian Liu has been following the rise in hate crimes against the AAPI community. She is an operations editor for the Washington Post. Marian, welcome. It's great to have you with us. What are the stories and experiences you've heard from Asian Americans in your reporting about how they feel increasingly targeted and unsafe?
It's all very heartbreaking. There was that 84-year-old grandpa that was so violently shoved in San Francisco that he later died. A 61-year-old Filipino man slashed with a box cutter as he was getting off the New York subway. This 48-year-old woman who was delivering a gift, she was tackled to the ground, punched, and burglarized. Police actually told her she was the first Asian woman of the night. Later, an Asian senior in her 60s was also stomped by the same group, breaking her kneecap. And recently, these medical students messaged me saying that one was on her way to the hospital to help people, was attacked, her knees kicked and mugged, and she cried out to passerbys as they stood in silence, and she was yelled at. They basically called her the Chinese virus.
These are all just heartbreaking stories. Can you take us through the historical context of hate crimes against Asian Americans? Because we've been here before, sadly, and how this pandemic has exacerbated it.
So what's really sad is I wrote about how this trend was going on last year, about how Asians have been historically associated with racism and disease. And there was a first quote in my story was this college student who was so ashamed of being Asian because of the bullying and harassment, she literally wanted to change her face. This history is where we're considered forever foreigners. It goes back to laws like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, laws that prohibited immigration, voting, even testifying for ourselves. And this act wasn't even repealed until the 40s.
Now, you write that data on this spike in attacks is scarce. Why is that? Is it the way it's being reported and the way it's being documented?
There's a number of reasons. One is cultural. There's a cultural belief to not speak out. There's a cultural saying where the highest nail that is, the nail that sticks up will be hammered down. So as a result, people are not coming out and speaking out. It's happening to them. There's also language differences. And also, for hate crime, the impetus is on the victim. So basically, they have to prove that there was racial bias. So in a lot of these cases, like I mentioned, the Filipino man who was slashed in his face on the subway, nothing was said. So it's hard to prove that was because of racism. And so in that case, the perpetrator got assaulted. And there's also no easy mechanism to report. So this professor who helped start a reporting site, he had called his California Attorney General to help collect data, and they said they didn't have the capacity to record these incidents. So he started Stop the AAPI Hate on his own.
And you report that some Asian Americans, are looking for ways to protect themselves. Some are turning to gun ownership. Do they feel like it's gotten to the point where they need to carry a gun with them, keep one in the home? And how is gun ownership traditionally looked at among, many Asian communities?
So this one 40-year-old man I spoke to, so many things had happened to him. He got assaulted, his house got broken into, the windows got smashed, and then he felt like he couldn't do anything. And then ironically, on the way to buying a gun, men jumped out of their car and called him a coronavirus. So he just felt so helpless, and he felt the need to protect himself. Another gun owner said that police can only do so much, and they're not always there to protect them. They're only there to take the report. So it's hard to say if it's, gun ownership is, accepted. I wouldn't say so much that way, but I think increasingly when we talk to gun shops, it seems like there are a higher number of, Asians buying guns. I mean, like the 40-year-old man, when he went to buy his gun, he said the line stretched around the block for hours, and everybody in line was Asian.
And so what are activists and law enforcement officials doing to draw more attention to these attacks? And how can we do something proactively to stem them? Because like you said, it's hard to distinguish if it's just a random act of violence or if it is something that's targeted against specifically an Asian person unless they say something, right? And so how can we prevent these attacks from happening? Should there be a stricter, should there be some kind of repercussion that is stronger than what there currently is now? What would you recommend?
So you mentioned Congresswoman Meng. They brought up the Hate Act. It could change how hate crimes are being reported. That's one thing. And law enforcement agencies are trying to do more. Police departments in San Francisco and New York have set up task forces to focus on the issue, along with increased police presence in predominantly Asian neighborhoods. And on the grassroots end, activists are patrolling Chinatown streets, giving seniors whistles and pamphlets. They're also walking with them, so they're not alone, basically rallying the community and bringing awareness and support to the victims. And at the very, grassroots level, it's asking if Asian community members are okay, if they need anything, if their parents need anything, and making sure that this issue is not basically that they're being hurt. I think that is the most important right now.
All right. Well, Marian Liu, thank you so much for sharing your fantastic reporting with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me on this important issue.